Christiana Figueres, thank you very much for granting this interview to Politics and Development magazine. Welcome to Pakistan. My first question is that whether climate change is a development issue in your opinion and how it impacts the Millennium Development Goals.
Well, climate is definitely a development issue. In fact, it's completely impossible to separate climate from development because, for one thing, if climate change continues unchecked, the estimations are that all of the development gains that have been achieved by the international community over the past 10 to 20 years are actually threatened, and that we may go back in terms of health, in terms of agriculture, in terms of food security, in terms of water availability. On many of the development goals, we may go back to where we were 10 to 20 years ago. So in that sense, it is completely impossible to separate climate from development. And in fact, I would like to point out that the Secretary General has called for precisely this interchange, this very intimate interlinking between climate and development to be the focus of Rio Plus 20, which is the 20th anniversary of the 1992 Rio meeting. And the entire world will be looking exactly at this interconnection between climate and development.
Yeah, and there is a lot of talk about capacity building in this effect. And you know the capacity is very limited in Pakistan. So what, in your opinion, has been the achievement on the front of capacity building during the last 10 years? Critics say that it has been a waste of time.
Well, I don't think it has been a waste of time. I think there has been an extraordinary effort of the international community to invest in capacity development. And having said that, I don't think that we will ever finish doing capacity building. The fact is, it is an iterative process. There always are, thank heavens, new people coming into the community, new people who need to be trained, new people who have new ideas that can contribute, and we always have new challenges that are arising because the science of climate change is an evolving process, and we will always have a new challenge to dealt with. So I think that the capacity building that has occurred has perhaps not occurred with as much geographic distribution or with as much depth as we would want, but has been helpful. And more importantly, it's very important to understand that we will continue to need renewed efforts on capacity building.
What is India's position vis-a-vis Pakistan on the issue of climate change? Because you are looking at the region. Would you like to enlighten us?
The fact is that in the context of climate change, India and Pakistan are very much on the same side. They're both developing countries. They're both very large countries. They're both countries that have very vulnerable populations. And they are countries that are doing their best to both face the adaptation challenges that are facing them due to climate change, as well as bring down their emissions in as much as they can. India already has several missions that they have put out there on energy efficiency, on renewable energy, very similar to the kinds of thoughts that are here in Pakistan. So when you go to the global commons, when you go to the space in which we're all actually in the same boat, such as in climate, the national frontiers and the national boundaries actually disappear, and we realize that we're all on the same planet and we all have to collaborate with each other.
But considering the nature of relationship between the two countries which are hostile, both consider each other eternal
Yes,
enemy.
but
What do you
not on
suggest?
climate. Not on climate. In climate, there is no such hostility because both countries are vulnerable and they both have very, very similar interests and similar challenges. So that is one area in which there is a coincidence of interest.
There is a big criticism that from where the $100 billion would come and the $7.5 billion that should have been come under fast track aid from the developing countries by 2010 have not reached to the developing countries. So don't you think that this impairs the credibility of the entire framework?
Well, the $100 billion is a commitment that would start in the year 2020. So developed countries still have a few years to identify the sources for that funding. The Secretary General last year launched a panel that has already presented its report to all governments of the world as to where there would be possibilities for financial mechanisms to come up with that $100 billion. The conclusion of that report is that it is going to be challenging but possible to identify the $100 billion a year that are going to be needed for developing countries. That is the long-term financing. There is also the short-term financing, which is $10 billion a year, 10 for last year, 10 for this year, and 10 for next year. So a total of $30 billion for fast start financing. And there, developed countries have actually lived up to expectations. And by the end of last year, they had identified 28 of the $30 billion that they have to come up with by next year. So they're already in advance of their schedule, at least in identification of the sources. Where they're somewhat behind schedule is in the implementation and allocation of those funds, because it was the understanding that 10 billion would be allocated last year, 10 billion this year, and 10 billion next year. And their developed countries are still in the process of identifying the projects that will be chosen for financing out of the five-star finance.
Which organization, in your opinion, are doing a good job on climate change in Pakistan? Can you name a few?
Well, it's very clear that the federal government is very involved, both on a policy level, now with the new climate change policy that they're actually have in a draft form, in which we were just been given a copy. It's very evident that provincial governments are also doing a great job in the implementation itself, as we have seen now in the province of Sindh. There, the development and planning ministry has been very, very active in already identifying what climate resilient measures can be instituted in the province of Sindh to build the adaptation capacity of the province and of the rural population. And then, of course, you have the whole host of civil society, a whole host of NGOs based in
Would you like
Pakistan.
To name a few?
Well, WWF, I had the pleasure of joining WWF Pakistan yesterday in a mangrove plantation project and green turtle protection project, and that they're doing in coordination, of course, with the local government and with IUCN, which is an international network of NGOs, but a very impressive project there where they are connecting the local communities and motivating the local communities to participate in both the protection of the green turtle as a resource, as well as planting mangroves to protect that whole coastline from future cyclones and increase the fishery capacity, because the mangroves, once they are at a point of maturity, attract shrimp and fish and can be harvested for local income.
How do you look at initiatives like CDKN of DFID? You think it will be helpful?
Don't know them.
Don't know them?
No.
Thank you. Thank you.